Tonight, we turn our focus to our neighbors to the north, the United States, as they prepare to decide who will lead them for the next 4 years. With just days remaining until Americans cast their final votes in this much-anticipated presidential election, we find ourselves closely following the candidates and the global implications of this choice. This election just isn't about who will occupy the White House. The outcome has ripple effects that stretch beyond the U.S. borders, even with reach right here in the Bahamas. From the potential shifts in trade and immigration policies to new approaches to climate action and foreign aid, the direction of the next U.S. president chooses could significantly shape our own future. So tonight, we're diving into what's at stake, not just for the American people, but for us and the world. This is On the Record, and our show begins on the other side of this break. As the presidential election draws near, all eyes are on the state of Florida, a battleground state that could make or break the candidate's path to the White House. Joining us now is our senior producer and anchor, Kendeno Knowles, who is gearing up to head to South Florida, where he'll be covering the election from a very unique perspective. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, thank you, thank you.
You all packed and ready to go?
Almost.
All right. Almost. So listen, people will ask, well, what's the interest? Why would our news choose to cover the elections in the way that we do? So let's talk about really what was the impetus behind the coverage.
So the fact is we've got a major Bahamian diaspora in Florida, a massive number of Bahamians who've descended from here that live in Florida in particular, but obviously in other parts of the United States as well. And the fact is those Bahamians are taking part in a historic election in the United States. For us, what's important is how do we now connect those Bahamians who are living abroad with those that are living here, and how their issues, the issues that are affecting them, ultimately trickle down to their families that are still living in the Bahamas. Ultimately, the Bahamian perspective is one that is perhaps driving our focus the most. We can watch CNN, MSNBC, Fox News, get a better sense of what is happening in the election and how it will ultimately shape America's future. But not very often can we find our voices in that discussion, right? Other diasporas from this region, they are, in some cases, front and center in the discussion. I could think about the Jamaican diaspora, and Jamaicans are also far and wide across the United States. Haiti. They are part of the conversation. Haiti, same. We can look at Cuba as well from this region. Those are communities that are actively taking part in U.S. elections. We don't get to hear the Bahamian perspective that much.
So we're choosing to cover Florida specifically out of all of the states where we're going to Florida. You're going to Florida. What makes Florida such an influential state?
So we've been working with a councilwoman out of Florida, Councilwoman Shannon Ighodaro, and she has been our contact on the ground. One of the things that she shared with us in a pre-meeting before going to Florida was the fact that the road to the White House runs through Florida. And the reason that is because it has the largest block of African Americans that make up the Democratic vote in that state. And so when you think about the fact that you've got the most African Americans voting in that particular state, particularly for the Democratic Party, the decision comes down to states like Florida. And so ultimately, that's what makes it a critical state. And I think we've seen in past elections how Florida's vote has certainly influenced the outcome.
You know, I'm a historical buff. I remember clearly the Gore-Bush election came down to Florida on the butterfly ballots.
And I was young during that time, but I remember certainly seeing that race in Florida being the discussion for weeks.
Yeah, for years in many instances. I think that election even helped to influence the ballot itself and how they vote. So, you know, speaking about Florida and the Miami-Dade area, Miami Gardens, the Miami Gardens community, I know will be a part of your focus as well, as one of those areas that has such a very large African-American population, but also a very large Bahamian population. So what are some of the issues you think are top of mind for Bahamians in that South Florida community?
All right, so the Republican Party has a very clear message when it comes to immigration, right? And you think about a state like Florida, where Florida is one of those sanctuaries for people that come from Cuba in particular, Haiti as well, and Jamaica to an extent, right? Obviously, we have a large Bahamian diaspora there as well. You would think that immigration may be an issue that people in the state of Florida are voting on. But the fact is just based on the research that we've done going into the state, the biggest issues that are driving voters, particularly the African-American community, simply jobs and healthcare. The fact is the economy has not been the best. And certainly people are feeling the effects of taxation and other issues that have compounded that, global supply chain issues that have caused people to be out of work in some instances, has led to inflation and caused people to have to spend more money. When it comes to jobs, folks are saying they don't just want jobs, they want jobs that are higher paying. Folks are saying when it comes to healthcare, they would like to see the cost of it come down. You'll see that that's one of the things that the Democratic candidate Kamala Harris has campaigned on, the fact that she's going to put a policy in place that is going to help people with elderly care, right? Because to be honest, there's a huge section of the voting bloc made up of millennials and Gen Z. The elderly people who will benefit from this policy, if she is in fact the winner of this election, are the parents of these millennials, are the grandparents of these Gen Z individuals. And so healthcare, jobs, those are the two things that are really driving people's vote so far.
On the national campaign, on the national level, there are two issues that both parties are that are shaping the debate, shaping the campaigns, one being immigration and one being abortion. The Democrats and Kamala Harris and her team have a very different position than that of former President Trump and his team. Is there any indication of how Bahamian South Floridians are coming down on this issue?
Well, I think when you consider the fact that what's driving immigration, people are looking for better opportunity. When you consider that could come into question, those policies could be adjusted to no longer allow for people to move as freely and easily.
Let's be honest, it will not be as liberal. Not be as liberal under a Trump presidency. Yeah.
Exactly. And so I think it's a concern. I think it would be a concern in any state, truthfully. But obviously with our focus on Florida, this particular issue of immigration, I think, has more to do with the fact that if it is that we are getting more and more people coming into that state, do we have the jobs to sustain? Do we have the healthcare facilities that are going to be able to handle the capacity of any potential migration, be it legal or otherwise?
Again, I go back to the abortion issue. The Democratic campaign, particularly in the last few weeks, has honed in on the female vote, on women, on this abortion issue. And Republicans have doubled down.
Yeah.
Again, not something that traditionally Bahamians will focus on, but something that must be somewhere in that top 10 as they go to the polls on Tuesday?
I don't necessarily know, just based on the research that's been done, that it's purely about abortion more than it is about women's rights. We've seen in the Kamala Harris campaign a big push for women's right to choose, but it comes down to the rights of women.
Which is decidedly different from just the abortion message.
Right. And so what I've found is even in conversations that I've had with people locally about the issue of abortion, is the issue isn't particularly about that for them more than it is just about a woman's right to choose. And so it just comes back to the issue of equality, right? Gender equality and giving women the right to decide. And ultimately, I think it's a divisive issue. I think everybody has their view and opinion, and in fact, some are driven by their own religious beliefs, right? And I think we see that playing out. I ultimately believe, though, just based on the campaign that we've seen from the Democratic Party, that is ultimately the message that they are trying to push, which comes right back to the issue of women's rights, including abortion.
Sure.
Yeah.
Have you observed any particular trends or shifts in how the Bahamian diaspora is viewing elections or these elections versus past elections?
So
take me out the equation. I love elections. I always been engaged. By the straw, who's about. But have you noticed a shift in how we are viewing and engaging?
I can say yes. I have noticed a shift. I can say that I have friends that live abroad, family members that live abroad. I have a sister that lives in Virginia, a brother who lives in the state of Georgia, and I have a best friend that lives in North Carolina, another in Michigan, one of those swing states. And in talking to some of them, the fact is they are engaged with this election in a way that I don't know that our conversations were driven by in past elections. And when I talk to them, some of the things that continue to stand out are jobs, healthcare, taxes, right? This issue of women's rights. It's something that is discussed in a way that we weren't approaching those conversations in the last election.
Well, I've got
right? And in the last election, you had two
Yes.
men who were running. That issue obviously coming up in the election prior to that with Hillary Clinton,
Right.
who ultimately lost to Donald Trump. But the fact is the conversations that they are having now with me or their friends and the conversations that they're having at work, as they have said to me, are mostly driven by how they are going to be able to plan for their future. And that future comes down to them, first of all, being able to access quality healthcare and jobs that are higher paying.
So it was almost a given that Bahamians and other people in the Caribbean diaspora were leaning Democratic.
Yeah.
But in discussions that we've had, it would seem that there are Bahamians who are looking at the Republican Party, who are looking at Trump as an alternative.
You know, this leads me to a conversation that I heard in the barbershop just a week ago. And it stuck out because it let me know that this is the perspective of a lot of people, and that is simply the idea that a Republican presidency will mean greater returns economically for the Bahamas versus a Democratic presidency that is seen as otherwise, right? The fact that in this election, which is seen as historic by virtue of the fact that we have a woman of color who is running for the highest office, you would think that that would be the thing driving the conversation. I don't necessarily know that it's driving the conversation in every space. And in a lot of the spaces that I've been in, I've recognized that it's not certainly been about that more than it has been about the fact that we want to make sure that whoever is in that high office is going to have ultimately a benefit for our country and our economy. Yeah.
So we're just about out of time. Two more very quick questions. How does covering a U.S. election compare to covering a Bahamian election? I can answer.
Well, you know what? You know what I will say? Particularly because we've got to go from one island to the next and get on a plane to do it. I could say that it is a very tough job to do in the Bahamas. And if you have covered an election in this country and you have gone from charter to charter and you've gone from island to island with campaign, from campaign stop in Mangrove Key and then going to another campaign stop in another part of Andros and getting on the plane to go to Abaco to do the same thing and then go to Eleuthera to do the same thing, it is a very vigorous thing to cover. I've never covered a U.S. election. I have followed them closely. I've enjoyed watching them. And so I'm excited to see what it will bring. But ultimately, what is more exciting to me is the fact that we get to be a part of the discussion in a more meaningful way, having a Bahamian perspective that you won't see on CNN and MSNBC and Fox, which we all love to watch.
Yeah.
Right?
Do you think, though, Bahamians will appreciate, the stories that we're trying to tell and what it is that you're trying to do to bring that perspective?
I believe so, and I believe that the people that we have lined up to speak to, who have been resident in Florida for quite some time, who are, again, participating in this historic election and have participated in others. I think hearing from them and their family and those connected to their families, being able to hear from them and why they're choosing to vote in the way that they will, I think is going to help give people a better perspective as to what's actually happening with our people who are abroad.
In these spaces. We wish you all the best. I know that you'll be leaving over the weekend. Yeah. Coverage starts on Monday, correct?
Yes, and it does. In fact, we do have a pre-election piece that's going to air on Sunday, and so I would ask the audience to stay tuned for that.
All right. So best of luck to you. Be safe. Yes. Have a good time. We're looking forward, though, to those reports. We do also want to tell you that our digital team is planning a really great roundtable that'll be coming up in our digital space on Tuesday as well, ahead of the election.
And I'd say that should be a very interesting thing for our audience to watch by virtue of the fact that they've got a number of people who are participating and are happy to share their views.
Yeah, so be sure and tune into our news on Facebook on Election Day for a great roundtable that the team has set up for that day. We wish them all the best. Kendeno, safe travels. We're looking forward to those reports. When we come back, we'll have insight from a voter from another battleground state. Stay with us. You're watching On the Record. Our next guest, Beverly Maycock, is a passionate Georgia voter and an advocate with the NAACP, working tirelessly to encourage the Black community to exercise their right to vote and stay engaged in the political discourse. Welcome to the show, Beverly. Good to have you with us.
Thank you. It's nice to be here.
I want to start by sharing how your work with the NAACP has shaped your perspective on voting as well as political engagement.
Well, I'll tell you, working with the NAACP, what I'm doing now is that I'm making phone calls to individuals that I don't know and just making sure that they have registered to vote and they're voting. Working with the NAACP, definitely, I'm growing and learning more about the American political system and the things that I need to do in order to make sure that we could continue to live a productive life.
What is it that motivated you to really get involved at this level within your community? Most Bahamians who are in the process will, if they're able to, will vote, but you are really involved at another level. Why was that important to you to get so involved?
I'm involved with my community outside of the NAACP. I am more involved with my community than I am with the NAACP. It is important for me to be involved with my community. There are things going on right now that my community needs to know. We're immigrants here. And we're finding out now that we might be on the list to be mass deported. So these are things that my community needs to know. So my community needs to know also about women's rights. I know I have a lot of friends, what have you. We're going to lose our rights to choose when it comes to our bodies. These are things that my community needs to know. My community also needs to know we have children that are in public schools. We need to know that they might lose the federal funding for these for children. Their kids might not be the ones that are getting the school lunches and have to get involved in the different programs that the federal funds afford the schools to do. But these are things that we need to know. So that's why I'm involved.
What would you say was the most pressing issue for you, or what would you say was the determining factor for you when you cast your vote?
I think it was thinking about losing my rights. I have daughters. I have friends that have daughters. And I cannot even imagine losing my rights completely. Okay, if they're taking away the right for me to choose when it comes to my health, what is next? So that is what is going through my mind. I want to be involved in the choices that when it comes to my children's health, when it comes to my health, I don't want to have the government tell me what I need to do when it comes to my health. That is why I have doctors. That is why I have my mother. And I will consult with them on the things that I have to do when it comes to my health, not the government.
You talk you talk about your health. Is this your reproductive health in particular you're speaking to?
My reproductive health, absolutely. I don't think that the government needs to be involved in that. I know that there are a lot of women out there, especially the women that are in the church, they're afraid of the word abortion. Well, abortion, it is not only, hey, I got pregnant, I don't want to have this baby, I'm going to go get rid of the baby. It's a lot more involved in having an abortion. And a lot of women are dying because they need an abortion, because something has gone wrong with these are women that are with partners and husbands. Something has gone wrong with the baby. They have to have an abortion. They're not being allowed to do this because wherever they are, what city they are, is saying that you can't have an abortion now. You have to wait. You have to deliver the baby, and then they're bleeding out. All kinds of things are going on. So this is what I'm talking about. Yes.
And do you think that message has gotten separated from the message of whether you are pro-abortion or you're anti-abortion? Have you been able to separate that discussion?
I don't think you can separate it. You have to be able, there are a lot of women, you have to go through the explanation and explaining to them, because they really don't know exactly what is involved when it comes to an abortion. So you can't separate it. We now have to educate.
All right.
That is our goal.
Sure. How do you feel that each candidate stance on immigration aligns with the values that you hold? I think you started to talk about it earlier on, but how do the candidates differ in their policies on immigration, and how does that align with you as a Bahamian?
Well, I'm definitely going with VP Harris, because it is not that VP Harris is not going to have to deport some undocumented immigrants. That's going to happen. But at least it's going to be done with care. It's going to be done with some sort of, you're going to treat people like they're human beings, because these people really are your neighbors. The other candidate, on the other hand, we don't really know what is going to happen. He is talking about bringing in the armed forces and mass deportation. We don't really know what that looks like. So I just can't tell you. I just know that I think that Vice President Harris will do a better job with the immigration issue.
As a Bahamian in the United States, living, working, do you fear deportation at any point?
No, I don't fear deportation. I can go back home. So that's how I feel. The promise is always there for me. I do fear. What I do fear is that there is going to be, I can't even imagine what's going to happen in the country if something like that happens. You know, there are going to be probably people carrying guns and people running, probably running to the Bahamas. We might have a bigger immigration problem there. We're the next country, the next island over. So we don't really know what's going to happen. So to fear, my fear is we don't know exactly what former President Trump means when he's going to do this deportation. So that is the fear for my children. What is going to happen with my kids, you know, coming to and from work, from school? How is this going to look? You know, is the armed forces going to take over the roads? You know, are they going to be stopping people? Are you going to have to carry your passports? So you don't really know what's going to happen.
I want to shift the focus a bit to the Affordable Health Care Act, known commonly in the United States as Obamacare. Why is this still a significant issue for people within your community, as well as people within communities of people of color?
You mean when you say there's an issue, you mean
well,
using
the concern that it may be repealed under another presidency of Trump?
Oh, yes, so that this is a concern because, I mean, this is really the first time. There are a lot of people out there, they have never had insurance. They're now afforded insurance. They can go to doctors. They can get medicine. They can get their medicine. The medicine is more affordable under Obamacare. So this is a concern. I just don't understand why the Republicans are going after this over and over. But this is a concern because there are children that are depending on this. There are senior citizens that are depending on this. I have introduced this program to Bahamians, elderly Bahamians in our community that now they didn't have insurance. They now have insurance. So this is very, very important that we vote for VP Harris so that we can move on and this can be a dead deal. We can move on with the Affordable Care.
Well, there's no question about who you're voting, who you're supporting, and who you're pushing people to vote for. But one question I do want to delve into is an issue that has been a steady uphill climb for VP Harris and her team, and that is this question of the economy. There are many who are in America who are saying that life was better under Trump economically, that times are harder, inflation is higher now under a Biden presidency under which Harris sat as VP. That continues to be one of the major talking points for the Trump campaign. But I want to get your feedback on that and what are you getting from voters on this question of the economy?
You know, you talk to some people, they say, oh, things are hard. But then when you meet with them again, they're at the ball game. And they're at, you know, they're going to the movies, and they're doing things like this. I think the economy is moving, and it's doing much, much better. There are things that needs to be done, and I think that VP Harris is going to address some of those issues. We have corporations that are out there that they can bring down those prices. The reason why we know they can bring down the prices is because if you go and you take a look at their financial statements, you can see the profits. So they can start sharing those profits and bringing down the cost for the American people.
This is being touted as one of the most divisive elections in American history. You look every day and you see the line between the two sides of the space growing wider. There's so much vitriol right now in America over this particular race. Does it concern you what will happen after November 5th? Come with me.
Well, what does concern me after November 5th is if VP Harris does not win. I can see that President Trump He has said it over and over. He has an agenda. And I think once he gets into the House, that agenda is going to start. He has promised his people to deport. There's going to be a mass deportation effort, and that is their number one goal. And I think that there's going to be, it's going to be a horrible, horrible time. I really do.
Let's flip the coin for a moment. Should VP Harris emerge as the victor after November 5th? We know from the previous election, President Trump and his supporters did not concede. We know January 6th happened with the attack on the Capitol. Do you have similar fears? Should VP Harris emerge victorious?
To be honest with you, I also have a lot of Republican friends that are not coming out publicly and saying that they're not voting for Trump. And I think there's going to be one big party because everybody's going to be glad he's gone.
That's an interesting perspective. Any last words you have that you want to send to voters who might still be unsure of how to cast their votes on November 5th?
I'm going to speak to, all of the Bahamians, even in the Bahamas. If you have family and friends that are in the U.S., there are some of us that have not voted. Please contact them and let them know. Please go out and vote. Please take your children and have who are eligible to vote. You're a citizen of the U.S. Please go out and vote. This is a time where we cannot sit back and not do something, because we may, next year around this time, it might be a big regret. So please, every vote is needed.
All right, Beverly Maycock, thank you so very much for spending this time with us and giving us that insight into your involvement, and also, giving us an idea on the pulse of America, particularly where you are at this time. So thanks again, and all the best to you. All right. When we come back, we're going to dig a bit deeper into the unpredictability of the polls, a bit more into the policies and wider implications for the Bahamas. Stay with us. We'll be back right after this quick break. In our final segment on the show, we're joined by Peter Deveaux Jr., also known to his thousands of YouTube followers as a foreign man in a foreign land. Peter's gained popularity for his insightful, long-form essays on politically adjacent topics that dive deep into the complexities and nuances of the political landscape. Peter, welcome back to On the Record. The last time you were here, we talked about all kinds of other things, but we're talking politics today. All right. So you are a keen observer of U.S. politics. What do you find most striking about this election?
Well, this election is going to be probably one of the most polemic elections the United States has ever had. And having lived in the United States when Trump was elected, also living in the United States when Biden was elected, I've been able to see the societal shift and the ramifications of an election like that. And I can only imagine now that what is on stand is Trump, yet again, one of the most divisive presidents that we've in the United States had, as well as the first woman of color who also has, depending on who you talk to, rather divisive histories. I can't imagine that this will be anything short of nail-biting. And in fact, polls can sometimes be wrong, as we know in hindsight, but polls have projected that this will be a scissor, like a nail-biting decision.
You've led me straight into my next question. Why do you think the polling has become so unpredictable? Not just this time around, but I remember, even in the Clinton-Trump race, all the polls were showing something completely different. But why is it you think that these polls have become so unpredictable in recent years?
Well, they've always somewhat been the political scientist in me is always going to, of course, account for the fact that there's always like a great deal of margin of error and variables when it comes to polling. They're not perfect at all. They're not a science. It's really an art. And what's interesting now is that you have this new edition of X by Elon Musk, formerly known as Twitter. And his introduction, of course, of Polymarket, which is also like this thing of presidential betting. So they're betting now, putting financial wagers on who will be president, which also, yet again, reinforces or throws off the actual race itself in the polling, because now you're seeing that, okay, this one is up on the Polymarket and I should bet on this. That actually influences the political outcome as well as the financial outcome. So even us discussing polling in itself can affect polling. So it's just like a chicken and the egg type of thing. And it's just very tumultuous. It's almost like the stock market. Mm-hmm. When someone does one thing, it could just throw off the entirety of the polling, which has a problem for continuity.
Is there a better approach, though, in measuring, or better approach to measuring public opinion so that it's more accurate? Are there things that we could be doing differently in order to better gauge where the public is coming down in an election race, whether it's ours, theirs, anywhere else?
So the research scientist in me, of course, will say that more randomized controlled trials and less bias in polling and reporting is crucial. And nowadays, there are a lot of different alternative facts and also data polling analytics with a agenda that are also putting their word into the mix. And that also just muddies the water and makes it very difficult to decide what is true versus what is false. So a way to combat that, of course, would be to have more unbiased and academically rigorous testings and pollings, and also to call out and have a centralized place where people can find this easily, call out the data centers that are actually flawed inside their apparatuses.
So for the average viewer who is consuming news and information all day long, how do we begin to understand, or how do we begin to zero in on those polls, zero in on those polls that can actually be trusted? Because you turn on CNN, you turn on ABC, you turn on Fox, you turn on One America News Network, and each of them has, in many instances, they all have a different view, or a different skew on the polling.
So that's actually a really good question. One of the sponsors that I work with for Foreign Man in a Foreign Land is a sponsor, and this is not sponsored, Ground News. And Ground News is an aggregate of all of these different news stations, and they show all of the different metrics that reveal the bias and the slants for these particular news sections. So Fox, they'll show like a blind spot, like, okay, Fox reported this, but their blind spot is leftist, so then they'll show what that blind spot is. And what you end up doing is you end up reading all of them. So, I mean, it is kind of an unreasonable ask to tell people to actually try to engage as much partisan news in order to get a bipartisan view. Because if you read everything, you have a panopticon of everything. Sure. So watch your CNNs and your Fox, read your BBCs and your APs, and just figure out what the thematic through lines are, and then you'll be able to conclude with, okay, if everybody is saying this, then there might be a theme and a kernel of truth in this particular statement.
How do you feel the candidates' economic policies could indirect the Bahamian economy? And I'm going to go with the economy first, because that is one of the top tier issues that people are going into the polls, or have gone into the polls thinking about. It's been one of those issues that the two sides have obviously grappled with, as with every election, but have come down differently depending on who you ask. So let's talk a little bit about the economic policies and how they could directly impact the Bahamian economy, depending on who wins.
Great question. So after preaching to the choir, because my audience, I have almost about 200,000, especially on the Foreign Man and Foreign Land channel, for political analysis, and they're mostly American. So this is a great and prime opportunity, thank you for giving me, to speak to Bahamians about what is relevant to them. And that would mostly be, as you say, the economic input as well as the immigration input, because those both work in tandem.
We'll come back to the immigration.
Okay,
so let's go with the
Let me focus on first. So with Trump, the economic platform and most Republican platforms, larger tax cuts in particular towards corporations, favoring corporations and billionaires. So if you're an aspiring billionaire out there, then you're gonna definitely want to go with go with Trump. But most of us are not billionaires.
Although we aspire to be.
Although you aspire to be. And if you're voting with your aspirations rather than where you are right now, may God be with you. But Trump is favoring corporations and billionaires. So they will get more tax cuts and it will be more lenient upon them. And that, of course, means that the economy will be more, in layman's terms, a little bit more amicable for richer people, not for poor people. So poor people will be able to see the effect when they go to the grocery store and things that used to cost $5, now cost $10. Kamala Harris, in particular, on the other hand, is looking more so to have a progressive tax, which is more so trying to make things a little bit easier upon the proletariat or the common person that is working class. So under a Harris administration, the promise is, because we don't know what is actually going to be effective, but the promise would be a progressive tax that would make it a little bit easier upon the person that is not making a billionaire's income.
So how does that benefit, or which one of those benefits the Bahamas?
If you are a billionaire that lives in the Bahamas, then Trump. If you are a person that wakes up at 9 to 5 and works 5 days a week, you probably want to deal with Harris because things might be a little bit easier for you.
Let's talk a little bit about the immigration issue, which is a very divisive and hot button issue.
Yeah.
Again, and this directly affects Bahamians living abroad.
Absolutely.
What would the immigration policy look like in a Harris White House versus a Trump White House?
So, and this is specifically resonates with me because I am Bahamian and American. I actually became American through birthright. I was born in New York, and that means that now I have citizenship in the United States. Under Trump, that wouldn't work. Trump has tried many times, despite it being a constitutional right, to find ways to make sure that birthright and just being born in the United States, even though you have lineage elsewhere, is not a thing that happens. Trump is a little bit apocryphal in trying to figure out if that could actually happen, because yet again, that is a constitutional right. But that is what he aims to do. He definitely has a harder stance on immigration that is unequivocal. We've seen what he's done, especially as it pertains to Haitian migrants. Even in Hurricane Dorian, to bring it closer to home, he wasn't extremely lenient when it came to Bahamians seeking refugee status in Florida, where a stronghold of Bahamians are. Under Harris, indifferent. Not too much indifferent, because if I were to typecast Harris in a political profile, she's more of a Clintonite, insofar as like a Bill Clintonite. She's a very centrist politician. She's not a radical by any means. So if Trump is far right, I would put Kamala a little bit like more center right, maybe. She is very militarily might. She enjoys the military. She's not America first, but she's a little bit less progressive than a Bernie Sanders or an AOC. And with her, immigration might be a little bit less tedious. The road for your path to citizenship as a Bahamian into getting to the United States in a citizenship capacity might be a little bit easier under Harris.
I want to talk a little bit about the role that the media is playing in shaping the perceptions of these particular candidates, particularly on platforms like YouTube.
That's an open-ended question? Because I could go on for a while.
Well, no, we're on a time limit, but let's talk about how is the media, or what has the media done really this time around in shaping the perceptions of these candidates?
So both presidential hopefuls have had long media campaigns, extremely delving deeper, even when Obama was found success in working with social media as a main tool and prioritizing that strategy. And we've seen no different from Harris nor Trump. And you definitely have a lot of different people, myself included, that are politically unambiguous. And if you would like to see something like that, you can watch a Foreign Man video. But as it pertains to YouTube, the good thing about it is it's democratic and you can say what you want to say. We're not held to the journalistic integrity standards that you and yourself are. So media has played like an extremely pivotal role. And the way that it happens so quickly in sites like YouTube or even X yet again, because more Republican propaganda is promoted through X, which is also known as Twitter. And for instance, when Trump made the comment about, well, not Trump made the comment, but when the comedian at Trump's rally made a comment about Puerto Rico, that spread like wildfire to the point where the Kamala Harris campaign was able to appropriate that and simply just run that. And that was their campaign strategy. That's something that's not been done before. And campaigning strategy is so different nowadays. Back in the days of yore, you would have people trying to more so go across the aisle and not alienate any particular voter because they don't politically align with you. Nowadays, they're very, very tailored messaging for campaigning on media because media has such strong information on you because of your Google account listening to you, all of these different services that you have listening to you. We can now, at an electoral level, campaigns can target exactly who they want to speak to and only speak to them and circumvent all of the rest of the other people because they have that draconian level of messaging.
One of the concerns that I have is the divisive nature of this election and what will happen in America come November 6th, the day after the election. The political battle lines are drawn very clearly. The delta is widening between the society. You see it is so pervasive everywhere you go. The messaging is very harsh. And in many instances, I look at it and I wonder, is there a place or is there a way for the country to come back together? Will we ever see, I mean, you're never going to see any unity in politics, but will we ever see a unification again, a uniting of the country when this is all over?
I never think it would. I never thought that the United States was ever unified. The closest thing they probably had to it was, of course, 9/11. And that's because they had a common enemy that was outside of that they could band together on. But this is a very divisive election. It is reflective of not a Trump or a Kamala. They are just mere branches of a more indicative root that is stemming from America's history. And the unfortunate past of America is one that is very deeply rooted in slavery, and the capitalist organization and experiment that America is built upon is now coming to fruition because you have people that were once considered not to be American now looking to be enfranchised like they are Americans. And now you have a reckoning from that system yet again. So when it comes to just exactly the ramifications of this, not only there, but over here, because of course, as we know, if America coughs, I say we die. I don't necessarily say we sneeze. That level of xenophobia, the fear of people outside of, will permeate. And I think like a lot of Bahamians, I myself came home simply because I know what it is like after living almost 10 years in the United States to endure the racism, the xenophobia because of your accent, thinking that you're Jamaican when you're actually Bahamian, and you being characterized into this particular thing that you're not seen as anything else. I wanted to be back home. And I have been thriving ever since I've been back home. And that's a message, I think, more so to Bahamians, because I'm speaking to Bahamians. The grass isn't always green on the other side, and this election will definitely stoke the flames of xenophobia and racism, and you need to be careful depending on where you are, because you ain't in Nassau.
Yeah, you're in Rome. And you know, I always say to people that oftentimes you have to be careful because many times that green grass you see is fertilized by manure.
Ooh.
All right.
You gotta put on a shirt, man. That's a good one.
All right. So, Peter, thank you very much for coming on and spending this time with us. I know that our digital team has approached you about being a part of our panel discussion that will be airing on Election Day. So we look forward to that. We again encourage our viewers to join us on the R News Bahamas Facebook page on Election Day in the United States as we continue this discussion and talk about so many other issues that are important to not just American voters, but to the world.
Yeah.
We live in a global society, and that's why we put so much focus on this, because we realize that, you know, as my grandma used to say, the world goes the way of America.
Ooh.
So, you know.
You're full of quotes today.
Frightening, but so true. Thank you very much again, sir. All the best to you. So we hope that you have enjoyed our show tonight. Thank you to all of our guests and for sharing their insights and perspectives with us on this critical U.S. election. They all brought a unique voice to this discussion, reminding us of the far-reaching impact of these political decisions and the impact that these decisions can have even right here in the Bahamas. And of course, thank you to our viewers for tuning in tonight. We hope that tonight's conversation has given you a clearer view of the issues at hand and the importance of always staying informed. As we await the results, let's remain hopeful for the day to come and remember the value of staying engaged with our neighbors. Until next time, this is On the Record. Good night, everyone.